right, everybody. Okay. Welcome. Oh, you know what? I probably have the book club opening theme. I sent myself over a whole bunch of other media over the weekend when I was at the studio doing some work, trying to get my life back in order. But it doesn't matter as long as we are here to take part in session 3 of book club for Lucifer's Hammer by Jerry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. What are we going to talk about tonight? Well, I'm going to just blitz through my notes, and then we're going to get to your thoughts, and it is a lot. It is a lot of great stuff, and I really, really would love to take a couple of calls. It would be some of the first calls to ever do in a book club setting, so I would really love to do that, and I hope that we can. Okay, so here's what we got. We started off with Hot Fudge Tuesday, and we went all the way over to where we are right now, which is The Landlord. And just so everybody knows, we're going to be going for next week, we're going to be going from the chapter titled The Landlord all the way to, I guess this is the book. Is this book 4? That's how this is done? Or part 4? Anyway, After Doomsday. So we're going from The Landlord and stop when you hit After Doomsday. I think it's either book 4. I think that's how it is. Okay, so that's what we have right now. So as far as Hot Fudge Tuesday, man, the last 100 pages, it was the fireworks that we all knew was going to be happening, and that the couple of 100 pages that led up to this prior to was really starting to get the anxiety. Really just it was building to know that you're living out the last days of normalcy on Earth, and something is coming your way. Some people don't know. People who do know are just trying to hide behind any kind of relief they can find in the probabilities that it won't hit. We're talking about the comet here. It was a lot. And at this point, the anxiety is gone, and now it is just adrenaline because you're in it. And you are seeing death and destruction, and it is total. It is total loss in many respects. We're talking about millions dead already. It's huge. So I'm going to go along with some of the these things here. My notes. So it opens up with Frank and Joanna and Mark. Frank and Joanna and Mark, they are surveying the highlands in Southern California, looking for places to be when the impact comes. This is when we start seeing people starting to contemplate the things that are about to happen. What's going to happen? What's going to be like afterwards? And we start seeing that in the contemplation of what's about to happen, everyone's primal nature that was otherwise subdued by all the creature comforts and the societal structures that we were able to build up and give ourselves over the last couple of 100 years. We start seeing everybody's primal nature rising to the surface. Most notably to me, because it was the first instance of this in the reading that we were doing, was with Joanna, who is Mark's main squeeze. Joanna, after a years-long satisfying relationship with Mark, she suddenly finds herself sizing him up to Frank, sizing him up against Frank to assess with whom she would have a better chance of survival. Okay, and she even the character even thinks about that in the middle of the assessment there. You know, what is this? Is this like, just our jungle nature coming out, just trying to figure out who am I going to shack up with? Who's going to be most useful in a post-apocalyptic world? So there's that. So I thought that was really interesting. That's in the beginning there, right in the first kind of chapters that we're looking at. Then we have General Bainbridge orders a nuclear attack readiness. So we start seeing a military faction or a military facet to all of this, even though that the entire planet is dealing with something that's coming from outside of its atmosphere, outside from deep space coming on in. Still, earthly militaries are on red alert, which you have to imagine that America's not the only one doing that. Then we just start getting the destruction. Then it just starts coming down. We are raining. It's raining hell on us now. We have these little glimpses, which reminded me of things like The Stand, where you have to do this stuff. We got these characters, Willis and McDonald. They're out there in Greece. And in their last moments, they were thinking about how this could potentially be the new Atlantis, where one day people are talking about, Greek civilization and what it used to be like, and then all of a sudden, boom, tidal wave. It is just instantaneous. I guess it was a Mediterranean impact or something like that, but instantaneous. You're talking about a wall of water that is traveling so fast that it's essentially a wall of concrete. There's nothing about it that could be survivable. And that was crazy. I love these little reflections there too. At the last minute, people sizing them up to who's going to write about me in history one day. And it really makes you think about how many times, again, and how many times we brought this up on Quite Frankly, where we'll ask guests, so how many great resets do you think there actually have been? Resets so great that there was really nothing left, very little left of the written record of what was there beforehand. And then it just becomes things of legend, where over the course of 500 to 1,000 years, it's really just a campfire myth story that you really can't confirm or anything. Will that happen to us? I know that this conversation right now is as real as day. Will that happen to us one day? Will we be figures of legend? 747s losing pressure in the middle of the air off the coast of New York, falling like leaves out of the sky. That's what we got in the later sections there. On page 222, in my book, page 222, plenty of people not knowing what else to do other than pray, and then being vaporized altogether. Here it is right there. The light flashed only for a second or two, but blindingly. Its after image was a blue balloon in the bearded man's field of vision. A red glow, strange lighting effects outline a vertical pillar. He turned with a happy smile. Pray, he called, the day of judgment is here. A dozen passers-by had stopped to stare. Mostly they ignored him, though he was a most impressive figure, with his eyes glowing with happiness and his thick black beard marked with the two snow-white tufts at the chin. But one turned and answered, "It's your day of judgment if you don't step back, earthquake." So there's the earthquake coming. There's a lot of this going on where some people are, again, just embracing what it is, loving it, thinking it's their way off the rock and into the next life. And then, as I think it's Tim Hamner that says later on in the reading that we did, it's not Ragnarok because I'm still alive. This is not the end of the world because many are still alive. Many have died. It was their end, but it wasn't mine. So it isn't Ragnarok, but it is something bad. It is something big and cataclysmic, no doubt about it. So you start seeing all the different approaches that people are having to sizing up what's happening to them. What about Gil? This is on page 225. Gil, the surfer boy, who was the side piece of that married chick. I forget what her name was because Gil was the real guy there. Gil, the surfer boy. He's out there with, I don't think it's his friends, but fellow surfers trying to ride out this gigantic tidal wave out in Santa Monica, riding miles-high waves at hundreds of miles an hour for at least a couple of miles in. Really, that right there, here's a couple things right there. Death, inevitable. If death was inevitable, what was left? Style, only style. Something a surfer boy would say, right? Gil went on paddling, riding the receding waters until motion was gone. He was a long way out now. He turned his board and waited. Others caught up in turn, spread across hundreds of yards in the rainy waters. If they spoke, Gil couldn't hear them. There was a terrifying rumble behind them. Gil waited a moment longer, then paddled like mad. Sure, deep strokes, doing it well and truly. And, of course, there's more on the next page right before he kind of bows out. But we're talking about miles overhead. Miles overhead. He said, "Oh God, if he lived to tell this tale, what a movie it would make. Bigger than the Endless Summer, bigger than the Towering Inferno, a surfing movie with 10 million in special effects. If only his legs would hold. He already had a world record. He must be at least a mile inland. No one had ever ridden a wave for a mile. But the frothing, purling peak was miles overhead, and the Barrington apartments, 30 stories tall, were coming at him like a fly swatter." Miles overhead. He's already ridden. I mean, so the imagery here, if you really just give yourself over to it, I wish I could be inside of your heads to see what you guys are painting with the help of Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. I wish I can see, because I bet you we're all seeing similar things, especially with how dark and rainy and muddy things are. There's more here, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Explosions and impacts are everywhere. Eileen, she starts off in shock at Joe Corrigan's shop, where Joe is now dead. This is where Eileen comes to terms with how different things already were, as people outside of the shop are shot. Some of the comet wardens, you know, that death cult, they have all the white robes on it and all that stuff. Because at this point, many people were blaming their inability to escape the valley because the white-robed cult called the Wardens, they have been blocking traffic and all that. And, it's kind of like the climate cults that we see now blocking traffic. But really, some of that might be a reasonable gripe. And then the rest of it is just, how far could you have really gotten out of Southern California in a pinch, just with the volume of people getting into their cars and trying to get out? You know, if you really wanted to get out, you can just run the people in the white robes over. They're accepting their death anyway. You might as well just kill them. Hate to put it that way, but you might as well. Let's see here. Officer Eric Larson. This is where we really get it. When Eileen sees Eric Larson kind of walk away from the shotgun wielding people in the street, and she realizes, oh man, a nice officer just walked away from this. What this is just the start. This is 5 minutes in. And Eric Larson has his own thoughts and realizations on that all too. On page 232 in my book, he says, "I've just watched Murder 1 and done nothing about it," he told himself. He walked briskly away from the traffic jam. It was as if his mind were no longer connected to his body, and his body knew where it was going. Where was it going? Where was it going? We'll talk about that in a second. More from Eileen on page 233. Eileen stood in the doorway. She glanced back at Corrigan's body. Two vertical lines deepened between her eyes as she watched Patrolman Larson's retreating back. A riot was starting out there, and the only cop was walking away, fast, after calmly watching murder. It wasn't a world Eileen understood. Everybody's coming to terms with this world, this brand new world that has just so quickly been created. And she sees Tim Hamner out there stuck in traffic in the middle of what seems to be this forming riot. So that's something, that's where she and Tim link up, and they really become a unit in a number of ways. They are travel companions. Toward the end of the reading, they're starting to fall deeper in love, whether that be by convenience or something else. I mean, at this point, I think feeling human is such a high priority that people are just going to be very, very grabby and lovey for a number of reasons. Depending on how much you lost, too. You lost your entire family. I don't think you're going to spark a new romance in a couple of hours. I think that you're more inclined to want to kill yourself, because it's a inescapable nightmare. And this is nightmarish. This is a nightmare. This like 90-something pages that we read for this week, this is the nightmare. Because it's not so much the destruction, it's the fact that there's no waking up from it, for the characters. That's the thing that really sucks. It's the psychological aspect of there's no going back. So Eric Larson, he was able to make good on one thing, though. He shot Fred Lauren, the sick, murdering bastard. He shot him dead in his jail cell. And that's great, because if he hadn't killed Fred Lauren, then I'm sure that a George Soros district attorney would have set him free and given him Dodgers tickets. Even though it was the end of the world, there would have been a George Soros DA out there letting Fred Lauren out. They would have given him some kind of incentive too. All right, so Tim and Eileen, they cross paths, they latch onto one another. They start booking it out of there. Horror all around them. There's a woman, obviously in shock. They write, both Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, they write shock very well, because you can just tell that there's a little bit of a, even though you're not seeing the characters, they're in your it's in the theater of the mind. You can tell that there is a sheen of disillusionment and just kind of disorientation to the characters, as they're it's a little bit harder to respond, and they're doing things that is just out of the ordinary for any sane human being to be doing. And that's where we start getting things like this, where as Tim and Eileen are driving away, you have the mother of a dead baby coming and giving them the body of the baby, obviously totally in shock and not even acknowledging that the child is dead, saying, take him, his name is Jonathan. And at this point, it's just like they simply dumped the body aside and kept going. What are you going to do? It's a horror. It's a horrible thing, but you can't what are you going to do with this body? And everybody out around them is losing their minds. Very few are keeping it together. Now, on page 241, we have the Gulf impacts a little bit more. This is an interesting little snippet over here. We see how in the Gulf of Mexico, how the impacts have already left a lasting impact for generations on the East Coast. The waters pile high along Florida's west coast, then they break across, carrying with them the sandy soil. They leave behind channels, scoured clean, a myriad of passages from the Gulf to the Atlantic Ocean. The Gulf Stream will be cooler and much smaller for centuries to come. Little things like that, really interesting. 248, moving right along. Page 248, we have Sharps. Let's see here. Little realizations. So Dr. Sharps is at the what is it? This is not the JPL complex. And he's sitting there. He says he poured himself Dr. Charles Sharps poured his cup almost full of coffee. He took it to the tap and ran a splash of cold water into it. It was mocha java made less than an hour ago with a Melita filter and kept in a clean thermos. A pity to water it, but now it was just cool enough to drink. How long would it be before ships crossed major oceans again? Years, decades, forever? He might never taste coffee again. Sharps drained the cup in 4 swallows and dropped it onto the floor. The heavy china bounced and rolled against the console. Sharps went outside at a run. Little things like that, contemplating whether or not, when's the next time the coffee is going to be imported from, I don't know, anywhere else. And then at that point is when we get the big one. For Californians, the big one is always a reference to, or almost always a reference to, the San Andreas Fault. Finally getting triggered into motion and just breaking off and forming a brand new island chain that used to be the farthest left coast of the United States. And the San Andreas, this really rocked people. That's when we get, the fault triggers along with every other one out there. Whatever kind of chaotic imagery that could be drummed up at this point is thrown at us, the reader, with the roaring of the earth and the opening chasms that swallow buildings and cars and people, everything. And it's at this point is when whoever is left over after the initial earthquake, and we're starting to get into aftershock territory. That is when Charles Sharps and whoever is alive there, I think it was about a dozen men and a half a dozen women, they all started prioritizing who's going home based on who is closer to home, and then shifting off and trying to grab people out of cars and whatever, and then trying to make their way out. That's where we learn a little bit about what's his name, Forrester, Dan Forrester, too. That's his colleague, Dan Forrester. He's insisting on leaving the office after the earthquake to go home and get his affairs in order. He was diabetic, out of shape, out of breath. He needed insulin, but he gets so, and that's the other thing there too. It's those little reminders. Now, last night on quitefrankly.tv for the Sunday night programming that I put together, the late night programming that we put on in the Night Owl shift was a coast to coast episode from, I forget what year, but it was an entire conversation about EMP attacks, which in effect is really just talking about if society goes away. That's it. It doesn't have to be a high altitude nuclear explosion. It could be a Carrington event. It could be directly from the sun. It doesn't matter. If everything we have right now that we've become dependent on goes away, what happens to us? And in what short order does it happen to us? Dan Forrester is one of those examples. When he says, when we learn that he needs his insulin, he's a diabetic, like, oh shit. How much insulin does Dan Forrester have at home? How long is that going to last him? And when he runs out, where is he getting more? This is why when we talk about disaster planning, one of the greatest things we always prioritize is getting your health, getting your personal finances in order. Because to be dependent on any kind of pharmaceutical, if you have a chance to be able to get off of it, is one of the worst things I could imagine in a lights out situation. Especially if you take insulin, which requires refrigeration as well. All right, so let's see here. So Tim and Eileen, they're making their way up the mountains with the imagery of this is 255. This was a really good one. This imagery was nuts. They were quiet again. The wind continued to whistle, but gradually they became aware of another sound, low, rumbling, building in volume, like a jet plane, 10 jets, 1,000 jets, roaring for takeoff. It came from the south, and they watched. And as they watched, some of the orange flares ahead of them went out. They didn't flicker and die. They went out suddenly, snuffed from view in an instant. The noise grew and rushed closer. So I'm envisioning already a dark setting, because remember, most of the time in these chapters it's like it's noon, but it's still dark as night, dark as pitch. They were talking about, you have these storm clouds, the dust, everything that's building overhead. It's the constant roar and rumble of the thunder and the lightning, and this rain that is coming down that is mixed with all the dust, so it's pretty much a mud storm. And down in the valley, because of all of the fires, the explosions, the house fires, the car fires, all that, they're talking about how there's these little burning orange embers that they can see from up on this peak down at the valley level. And all these little orange embers of fires that are going on there are just they're just snuffed out in a sheet. That's how they know that it's the tsunami that's rolling in, and it's a tsunami that they hear that is building like 1,000 fighter jets. And if you know anything about how loud one fighter jet is, if it makes a pass over, if it flies over you. I was reminded of this just a couple of months ago. I went out to Home Depot to pick up a few things, and on my ride home, I just heard this huge roar. I knew exactly what it was. I looked up, there was a solitary F-16. Solitary F-16. So I was thinking about that and trying to create a little bit of scale to what was now coming in the tsunami department from multiple impacts all over the world on land and sea. So let's see here. So now here, so as far as Dan Forrester goes, this is a really interesting part here too. This is apparently on page 275. Now Dan Forrester, he gets home. He actually makes it home. And not only is his home pretty much intact, there's some flooding over there and whatever, but he's got power, and he has not been robbed, which is really interesting to see at this point. But he goes home to get his affairs in order, And this is where we start seeing that he put so much time and attention. He put so much time and attention into saving his library of books. And he put it into an old septic tank, taking naps in between and wrestling with his own usefulness in this new emerging world. And when I say wrestling with his own usefulness, here it is on page 275. Is it on page 275? Hold on a second. Oh, here it is. 276. Daniel Forrester. Oh, wait. There was really one valuable item. It would look like trash to the average looter, but it might get him to safety. Daniel Forrester, Ph.D., was a middle-aged man with no useful profession. His doctorate would never again be worth as much as a cup of coffee. His hands were soft. He weighed too much. He was a diabetic. Friends had told him that he often underestimated his own worth. Well, that was bad too, because it restricted his bargaining ability. He knew how to make insulin. It took a laboratory and the killing of 1 sheep per month. Yesterday, Dan Forrester had become an expensive luxury. So there you go. Now, as far as how he goes, I have to imagine he's going to survive. How long, I don't know. But the fact that he is one of the guys left on Earth who know how to make insulin, and all he would need is a little bit of a laboratory and a sheep. You get a month's supply there. That would be interesting. Interesting to see how that, he's going to have to be able to do that for himself, and soon, no? So there's that. Now, Tim Hamner continues to grapple with what has been, lost. And the readers get this is on page 260. I think I jumped around a little bit here. And the readers get a little bit of a 30,000-foot view of what the tidal waves sweeping across Antarctica and Asia are getting here too. So on page 260, we have a little bit from Tim. Let's see here. Intellectually, he knew all this would be ending as he sat there emotionally. Well, this couldn't be Ragnarok, as I said before. Ragnarok was supposed to kill you. The world was still here, and Tim wanted help. He wanted courteous police, briskly polite shopkeepers, civil servants. In short, Tim wanted civilization. Again, one of those nightmare scenarios of you wanting to just wake up. You just want to wake up and have it all be going back to the way it was, but that's not the case. And of course, another one of those asides about what's going on, third person omniscient kind of a thing that's going on here. The right-hand edge of the wave impacts against Antarctica, breaking off glaciers 10 miles long and 5 wide. The waves burst through between Africa and Antarctica. When it reaches the wider expanse of the Indian Ocean, the wave has lost half of its force. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's good. What's half of the force? Now it's only 450 feet high. At 450 miles an hour, it moves toward India, Australia, and the Indonesian islands. It sweeps across the lowlands of southern India, then, focused by a narrowing Bay of Bengal, regains much of its strength and height as it breaks into the swamplands of Bangladesh. It smashes northward through Calcutta and Dhaka. The waters finally came to a halt at the base of the Himalayas, where they are met by floods pouring out from the Ganges Valley, as the waters recede, the sacred Ganges is choked with bodies. More bodies than usual, because, of course, they just throw all their dead bodies into the Ganges anyway. That's also where they do a lot of their bathing. So nothing really changed for India as far as cleanliness goes. but let's keep rolling. Gordy Vance, what has he's been doing? Gordy is handling things pretty well with the kids. I mean, it's scary. They're up in the mountains. They're safe from all the floods and all that, but they're still exposed to the elements. It's a scary experience, but the last we read about Gordy, it's on page 264. He ends the chapter. Gordy Vance suddenly threw back his head and yelled in triumph. He was going to live. So Gordy has kind of embraced this position and almost seems to soak in the severity of it all with a sense of triumph and confidence. So that's really interesting because at least the kids are in good hands. And then we can catch up with Harvey Randall on the other side of things. He gets back to his neighborhood to see what's become of Loretta and to get some supplies from the house. And the house has been turned upside down by looters, and Loretta was shot to death, which is just so sad. It really is. Seemingly in the middle of preparing her own little go bag with what Harvey has seen to be useless items like makeup and all that other stuff. And this is when Mark and Joanna show up, but without Frank. You remember in the beginning of our reading, Joanna is starting to size up, who should I shack up with here in a post-apocalyptic world? Is it Mark or Frank? And she's kind of leaning toward Frank. And Frank is dead. Shot by other bikers that we actually, there's little references to them at the end there. Mark was shot at, and it went past Mark and killed Frank. And he fell off of a cliff, a ravine. Joanna said if the shot didn't kill him, then the fall did. And Frank was dead. Shot by other bikers who they wrongly assumed, they being Mark, Joanna, and Frank, they wrongly assumed that the other bikers would be friendly along the trails up there in the hills and all that stuff. And so Mark helps Harvey bury Loretta, and then they grab anything that they can be useful for the trip. And that's really it. That's when they encounter the insufferable Marie Vance, Gordy's wife, who we start seeing a little bit more why Harvey really doesn't like her. She is pretty. I get vibes like I can't stand her either. So that's just something. But there's a lot there. There's a lot going on there. And the one thing that Frank did do was leave behind the idea that they have to go to the Mojave Desert. They have to get out of there, and it's probably the best place to go. So that is going to be where they are all starting to head, I think, very, very soon. Although all throughout the reading, resources, you can tell, is going to be very, very bad. Okay? Military, I guess guys who used to be in the military are just putting their uniforms back on and volunteering their services to try to ration what's going on, what is on the shelves at any supermarkets that have survived. You can tell that this is going to be a really bad situation where everybody's already looking for their next meal and nobody knows where it is. And civility is just breaking down among everybody. So then we have Tuesday afternoon from space, which I was waiting to. I wanted the next space chapter so bad, with the Russo-American team up in orbit in that space, in the space capsules. They're watching all these things up there, land being turned into temporary ocean, storms that are whipped up instantly, covering huge swaths of the planet. The Russians, they're pretty much accepting they're dead. They're accepting that their families have been killed up there in Russia. Seems that there was a northern impact that was pushing ice and glaciers down across Russia. And while they are contemplating what is happening to their family and friends in Russia by way of ice, the Americans are seeing what is happening in the Gulf and what's affecting Texas and the Gulf states over there, and pretty much coming to terms with how bad it might be down there by way of water and fire. So everybody has something to lose, but you're coming from two different perspectives here. And it's really interesting, especially written in 1977, because we're in the middle of the Cold War still. That's still going on for, another 12 years or so before the fall of the USSR. And so this is going to be a very relevant, much more relevant to the reader back then than it is right now. And the Russians are accepting all this, the family, and then, of course, Rick and Baker, they're going through that. And then things go literally nuclear. Nuclear at page 285. And I want to get through this real quick because I want to get to your super chats. There's just so much in here. Page 285. This is where I went, oh, shit. Let's see here. There were dozens. Here we go. There were dozens of tiny sparks above the black cloud cover of Hammerfall. Hammerfall is just It's just the event that they were watching. Let's see, where the hell we at? More were coming through. A field of tiny rising sparks, fireflies in formation. Leonilla lost her handhold. She drifted back across the width of Hammer Lab, held by the hate in Rick's eyes, unable to look away. Peter saw that look and braced himself, one hand gripping hard to moor himself, the other fist clenched and ready, bracing himself to defend the woman from the threat he didn't understand. And Johnny Baker dived in a clean arc across the communications panel. He turned frequency dials in carefully, controlled haste, pushed buttons and spoke. Looking glass, this is Whitebird. Looking glass, this is Whitebird. Soviet Union has launched massive ICBM force. I say again, they've launched their rockets. So they've gone nuclear. And they're thinking that these rockets are going to hit America in the middle of all this. And now they're saying they're trying to get anything down there to Houston to say, fire back, get the Russians, whatever. So, I mean, on top of everything that's coming in from outer space, now there's a nuclear launch. We start learning quickly, though, by the next page, that those rockets go east. And they're going, and they curl back downward, and they're going toward China. And the Russians pretty much hit China. On page 285, so it wasn't Russians going after the U.S., but on page 285, they go in there. Let's see here. Madness. Johnny Baker thought, but why? Why? I don't think we'll be able to, hold on, let's see here. Let's see, where's the quip about China? She said that she's pretty much, they're going after China because that is the closest. Is it next page? Hold on. Oh, here he goes. You know why, Leonilla Malik said. She left her place at the viewport. Our government had already coveted China. With the threat of glaciers coming, that's glaciers being pushed down from the north on top of Russia, Russians have only one place to go. Europe has been destroyed, and there is very little to the south. If we can reach that conclusion, the Chinese can also. And so they attacked, Chekhov said. But not in time. We were able to launch on our own. Our own strike. So now there's a nuclear engagement that has happened between Russia and China. That's all happening. Then it all ends with, the U.S. president has been killed. His helicopter went down. And all of our reading ends with Tim and Eileen making a $250,000 IOU deal for a new Chevy Blazer, and then continue on their way through treacherous roads and bridges, dodging mudslides, falling in love, and just trying to find a route away from the epicenter of all this and into a little bit more of an easier place to assess the damage and figure out what they're doing next. That is, I'm sure I left a lot out, but I just wanted to get a skeletal vision right there. That's where we're at. And you can see why there are so many damn characters. We're going to have to crack a few eggs. Okay? And still many are alive, but I have to imagine that we're going to have to say goodbye to quite a few of them. Now, let's get over to the super chat. To the thread. Let's get over to the thread, and I'm going to leave the line on. 914-200-0269. If you wanted to share some brief thoughts, a specific passage, anything that you want to bring attention to, anything that really struck you, have some thoughts in mind, be able to get it all out in about a minute and a half or so, whatever, or whatever. Just have one main thought so we can get a couple more people in. And if nobody's calling, I'll let you go a little bit longer. But for now, the line is open, and I'm going to start reading it, starting with Vesper. Vesper quotes, "If you do not expect the unexpected, you will not find it, for it is not to be reached by search or trail." That's Heraclitus. Advice the book characters should take. I'm certainly taking it as a reader. Great read, Frank. I'm glad that Vesper likes it. It's good stuff. And NJSF says, "This is the bit I like about Stoicism. 3 seemingly contradictory sayings, but that together guide quite a bit of resiliency." There's a lot. There's a lot here. Mava says, well, that was 100 pages or so of unrelenting stress. No. The authors really put you inside Hammerfall. Very harrowing stuff in this section. What the characters deal. Let me put this up on the screen. There you go. What the characters deal with, along with the descriptions of what the planet is dealing with. The one idea and dread I came away with was the scary thought of not knowing. That is what civilization really affords us. Being able to be grounded in reality is a comfort that would be gone. The ability to lean on the bedrock of, well, I don't know, but someone else will. Gone. Really makes me ashamed of the fantasizing I was doing on preparing for a Hammerfall situation. Nothing could ever prepare us for this because it's not about picking the right things to bring to the other side of this. It's more about bringing a correct mindset, or more importantly, an openness to every single thing that we take for granted being gone. Sadly, it would be near impossible to not measure every situation against what we had before. Self-pity would infect most decisions. Reminded me of the line from the Hopkins Baldwin Survivor movie, The Edge. Do you know what people die from when they're lost in the wild? Pride. One last thought. Oddly, the moment that hit me the hardest was the scene at JPL when it was the manifest to Sharps. When it's manifest to Sharps what is happening. He calmly goes to the coffee pot and pours a full cup, adds a few drops of water to cool it off, and downs it. And why? Because it thinks it'll be the last. It'll be 1,000 years, if ever, before coffee is available again. Wow, what a way to make us really feel it in our guts what just happened. And here it is again. We're all seeing the same things. These are tiny details, and it speaks to the talent of the authors because they know who their audience is. The audience is human beings who have a lot to lose. We've got a lot to lose. You know, and we talk about doomsday scenarios in a live setting and all that stuff on a night-to-night basis. We talk about that. We explore those a little bit more, mostly because they're spooky and they make you think about the what if. But it also, because we are in such a comfortable position, it gives people a little bit of an opportunity to, I don't know, just boast a little bit, be a little bit of pride, be prideful. I mean, if modern world went away. Doesn't matter. I mean, you people who are living in rural areas and already growing 80% of what you eat all throughout the year, yeah, you do have a leg up. You do, especially at first. And then you know, it's just compound life, and you have to be militarily prepared to be able to defend what people are going to come and find and try to take. So everybody's going to have a certain set of challenges if it all goes away. You know, it gives me some peace of mind knowing that I have a little bit of emergency food. But you know what? It also makes you think: what does having a sack of silver coins in your back pocket really mean? What does it really mean? You know, in this kind of everything's gone. Now, as far as a store of value. With the lights staying on, civilization pretty much staying intact, but we're going through some kind of a rocky economic transition, and you have a store of value to be out there, to go out there and be able to leverage yourself into a new way of paying for things or to buy in nonsense. I mean, there's plenty of utilities for precious metals and all that stuff, but in this kind of a scenario, are you running inside and grabbing your shoebox full of silver? Is that going to be the first thing you run for? Or are you going to grab yourself your guns and maybe a little bit of food or whatever? I don't know. I mean, maybe your go bags have a little bit of everything in there, and that's good. But yeah, this came fast and hard for a lot of people. Let's see. Dyslexic Angel said, I agree it was a stressful reading session. I don't think I actually breathed fully until I got to the landlord chapter. I also became more pissed off with certain characters like Gordy Vance, Harvey Randall, and sad for others like Loretta and Eric Larson. I was sad for, you know, me when poor Loretta, and Eric Larson. But why are you upset with Gordy? Hold on, let me see. How dare Gordy Vance, be so selfish to bring along six young boys on the ruse of a camping adventure when what he wanted were witnesses. That's what he wanted. Did I read this wrong? You're making me rethink this. Hold on. He reminds me of those who prevent to be good, kind, and are mostly weak, selfish individuals. All he wanted were witnesses to his death. But he celebrated the fact that with confidence that he was going to live. It seemed like he had vanquished death at the end of that chapter. He had to be a high enough cliff to ensure optimum results. Let me see here. Then on page 263, when he considers that he might be just it might just be a goddamn meteor, but doesn't solve my problem. The bank examiners will still be around next Friday, and I wrote in my book, asshole. Did I miss something very vital here? Somebody call in on this. If anybody out there is waffling on whether or not they should call, please call in and tell me if I have completely gotten Gordy Vance wrong. Because this is throwing me for a loop. Another annoying character for me was Harvey Randall. Sure, his wife was cute and bought frozen foods, and he went out and conducted his own prepping, but when she requested that he stay home with her because she was afraid he wouldn't. I'm with you. I don't necessarily like Harvey at all. He didn't bother listening to her because he was more caught up in what his needs were, getting the money shot, and all that what ifs if he would miss the stay with her. He finds out later how very devastated he is by her loss. I don't really like him too much because of that, but I do also recognize that his wanting to be out there was a coping mechanism. He wanted to get the money shot just in case it was. I understand that was it had to be a coping mechanism. Let's take a call. Let's see. Linda, you're on the air. What's going on?
Hi, this is actually Melanie.
Hey, Mel.
From the Vermont retreat.
Hey, Mel.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. So you got something. What did you get from Gordy Vance on this?
Yeah, so I was under the impression that he was going to kill himself because he had some troubles with the bank in his job. And so he went up to the mountain so that he could sort of have an accident on one of the cliffs and fall off.
My God. How did I miss this?
And I don't remember what page it was on, but that's when he woke up, and when he saw that the comet actually fell, he was like, oh, thank God, I don't actually have to go through with it. Oh.
Wow. Well, that is scummy that he was going to kill himself and just leave these kids stranded up there.
Yeah, and that's why he thought Harvey Randall's son would do a good job. He was prepping him for a while to, be the leader, take control, and thought that the boys would be all right.
So was there any element of him wanting to bring the kids to a high enough elevation so that they would have a better chance of survival, though? Because if he wanted to kill himself, he can just go do it. Why did he bring them all along for the ride?
I think he had the trip planned for a long time. And then it sort of coincided nicely with the comet falling, sort of I think it was a happy accident. But yeah, he wanted to go up there so that, it didn't look like a suicide, that it looked like an accident, so that his family, I believe, could get some sort of payout and it would cover the bank scandal.
Okay. Sense. Wow. All right. Well, there is one thing I totally lost, and I'm glad that we're that this came up, because this adds a little bit more of a bittersweet depth to him, and actually it's more bitter than sweet.
Yeah, for sure.
So how are you liking it other than that, Amel? You having a good time?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm surprised, I'm not an avid reader, but I've been keeping up and finishing my chapters before Monday.
See?
And it feels good.
It does feel
I'm able to do it.
It does feel good. Did you read any books with us last year, or is this your first time?
This is my first time.
Great. Hopefully you keep up with it, because I think we have some good stuff to do this year.
Yes, I hope so too.
All right.
I hope you have a great night.
Yeah, call in again and keep up with this. This is great. You're the first book club caller ever.
Woo! I'm gonna have to tell my mom.
Yeah, write that down. But mark the date. It's January 22nd, 2024. First ever.
Awesome. Thank you.
See you later. Mel is wonderful. Got to hang out with her and her mom at Jay's retreat in Vermont. And I hear that he's already market testing some late September dates for the 2024 retreat, which may be in New Hampshire. So, New Hampshire? All right. The lines are still open. Lines are still open. If you have anything that you wanted to point out, anything that stuck with you, anything, call on in and we'll just mix those in. We're going to go for another maybe 10, 15 minutes because we started a little bit late. Let's take another call. Hello, sir. You're on the air.
Frank, what's up, buddy?
Hey, who's this?
Yeah, this is Quincy's Finest from the chat.
What's going on, Quincy's? It's finally nice to put a voice to the name. So, what have you what have you been drawn to for these chapters, and what do you got for us?
Well, first of all, I'm gonna start off on a bit of a negative note.
Okay.
The chapter when the guy is the bearded preacher is gathering everybody on the side of the road, and he sees the tsunami coming, and so and he's embracing it all. I'm totally with that scene, but then it says at the very end of the chapter, it's like a small flash, a small black flash slashed across the wave just before it hit, and I said to myself as I was reading, if that's a fucking surfer, I'm going to lose it. If they put a surfer in riding the tidal wave, I'm like, they've jumped the shark for me. And that's in the very next chapter was
With
right
Gil?
into the perspective of the surfer. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Well, wait a second. But you don't think that in facing death, the inevitability of death, you wouldn't have anybody out there that just said, I am going to catch the biggest wave in my life?
I think you would find a crazy person to do that 100%. Would it actually happen that he was able to ride a tidal wave 2 miles inland? Come on.
Well,
so that they lost me on that. I was like, that's totally ridiculous.
Well, yeah, you're right. It is the more fantastical of all the endings to a character in this so far, because it
was goofy and funny, and I was just like, oh. I saw it as soon as I saw that slash on the wave. I was like, please don't be a surfer, please don't go goofy on me.
Okay, so then what that was the negative point. Now what's the other one?
I didn't really have a specific point other than I wanted to touch on the tidal wave, but
okay.
Overall I think I agree with your character assessment of Harvey, kind of rolling up and being a little girl in the back seat of the car and just like totally folding in the face of adversity or whatever. Like, I thought he was going to end up being one of the cooler characters.
Right.
During like, he even like thought to like pound out pemmican. And like, I didn't even know what pemmican was. I had to look that up. That's like an Indian high source of protein, like storable food that was like Native American.
Yeah,
like,
wasn't it? I think what you're the pemmican is a really interesting part about Harry's Harvey's character arc here, because at that point he's showing that he is conscious of what is coming their way, and he's trying to be proactive, and he's trying to be a provider. And I mean, that's something that you would do that makes sense. And then, like, why would you prepare jerky and prepare some things that, would be good for you to just throw into a bag, grab your wife, and get the hell out of Dodge and give yourself a chance? And at the same time, after you make the pemmican and it's drying out, you tell your crying wife you got to go, and you want to go do some television work in the middle of all that. It's so weird.
I do think that there was like a very much an element of like, is this thing gonna hit? Is it not? And most likely, I think most people, like, while like he didn't want to admit to himself that the fever, what are they calling it, hammer fever,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't want to admit to himself that was possibly something that was infecting his mind,
Yep.
like as a professional news journalist or whatever, like maybe pride, maybe whatever it was, but I feel like that inner struggle was occurring within him. So you could see him like battling with that. He was preparing the pemmican, he was buying spices and liquor for trade and stuff, but then he was also like putting just as much effort into his day-to-day civilized work.
Right.
And like I feel like that struggle, like that was a very much like visualized struggle of those two worlds colliding. Like,
Well, it was like I had said before, and thank you so much for calling in, Quincy's. It's great to hear from you, and I hope this is the first of many when in this setting.
excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Good to talk to you, Frank.
Absolutely, really wonderful stuff there, and I think that just goes back into my initial about Harvey when who had just said it over here, Dyslexic Angel. Yeah, it's denial. Not wanting to give in to hammer fever. It's denial. It's avoidance. And it makes you do half-hearted, scatterbrained things. Like you're half preparing, but you also don't want to seem too worried. So you go back to work, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's like the strippers in Independence Day. You have these gigantic alien craft that are hovering over every major city in the world all at the same time. It cannot be a good thing. That shit happens. You got to get the hell out. Nothing good is going to come from that. But you go to the strip club. You go to the strip club to work with an alien craft hovering over your city. That's like Independence Day with the strippers going to work that day. What are you fucking doing? There's so much. Let's see. What else do we have here? A couple more. Robert Solario says, what book would you take on a deserted island? Dan Forrester, PhD, The Way Things Work. Damn, Frank, where have you led us to? Well, NJSF says it's actually a very sensible choice, yet some living off the land, like herbal medicine, basic survival, are also useful. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, here's Quincy's Finest. Quincy's Finest over here. I'm glad he picked up on this because I was going to make a joke. At the end of page 288, when they're deciding where to land the shuttle, they're in space. We are losing air and we're losing power. If we do not act quickly, we will be unable to act at all. You say California. Will two communists be welcome there? Yeah. Quincy's Finest says, yeah, I think you'll be fine, pal. And I was saying the same exact thing. I said, oh, you commies will be right at home. Now, in 1977, it would have been a little bit more red. It would have been a little bit more red, white, and blue out there. But now, I mean, if they were to land their craft out there in 1977 and just hid for a couple of decades, then they'd be able to run for mayor. No doubt. So that was good. All right, let's see here. The Communists in California line legit made me laugh out loud. That was from Jalen Weddings. And let's see here. Furry Merman. Chaos is completely taken over both on Earth and in space. It was comical to see the cosmonauts ask if California would be a good place for two communists. I'm interested to see if Hamner and Eileen are able to have have safety at the mountain observatory, or will people be out looking and taking liberties on any found property along the way? It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Sharon said these chapters read like you were watching a movie. The struggles to survive, no matter the character or just the random people, like Gil on his surfboard, waiting for the big wave, hoping to ride it out. Now, it's impressive imagery when you think about being on this wave and having miles of water above you. But again, remember, these waves are supposedly coming at hundreds of miles an hour, if not nearly 1,000 miles an hour. if he was going 1,000 miles an hour, then he went a minute. He went a mile in like a couple of seconds, so it couldn't have been that fast. It was definitely hundreds of miles an hour. But even then, if he's going 100 miles an hour, if he's going 60, if it's a 60 mile an hour wave, obviously he's going a mile a minute. 100 miles an hour, he's pretty much going a mile every 30 seconds, about that. So it's like, you know, obviously they just wanted to be able to get that imagery of the kid jumping up there and just surfing his way into the history books and surfing his way into heaven. But the physics of that mega tsunami that is coming in, I don't know how any human being would be able to stay on their feet attached to a board as they're going at that. So it's really just, they're trying to give you a little bit of everything. The surfer on the tsunami, the 747 falling out of the sky like a leaf blowing in the wind. They're giving you a little bit of everything. The Greeks. Okay, let's see here. One or two more. Kenny in Cleveland said, page 302 to 307. A tragically beautiful scene is painted here between Tim and Eileen. In many ways, it's a relatable one, albeit not under the terrifying and tragic circumstances these characters are enduring. It's almost as if you can imagine being placed in the blazer with them as they try to navigate their emotions. It's their first time that they've had a moment to stop and let the adrenaline wear off since they found each other outside the shop on the street. The first moment to actually think, to mull over the complicated past, to contemplate the future, to realize they are in it for the long haul and together, and just to lay in each other's presence, it definitely captures a very human element. Yeah. Yes. So I'm saying, even though, you know, there are some people, some characters in this book who have lost way too much to strike up a new romance, but these two people, they're primed to, in that case, be a lot more willing to give themselves to each other, just because that love, or even just the physical closeness, is something that is comforting and familiar. And at that point, you need to latch onto anything you can. I can see that 100%. Now, we're about to wrap up because there's just so much here. But there's always wonderfully detailed posts in this thread, especially by NJSF. Guys and gals, no matter when you're reading this, if you're reading this along right now live, or if you're reading this down the line, if you're just going on demand and all that, these threads are still up. As long as society is still here, these threads are still up. Click through them, read them, comment, become a member on the forum. Even beyond these book clubs, the forum is so important. This installment finds us in the weeds of Hammerfall, says NJSF. It was a bit satisfying to see the structure of a 70s disaster movie come to fruition, with all the characters weaving into the same locations and interacting. It even starts to look like Jellison's Ranch will be the Noah's Ark of Hammerfall. Yes, I'm very interested to see who ends up there. What most captivated me was the exploration of human psychology under stress, and how the natural tendencies can either be augmented or muted with the occasional humor relief. The natural female instinct in choosing the strongest male to increase odds of survival was a surprise to Joanna when, together with Mark and Frank, not Fred, contrary to all of her modern, strong, independent woman condition. Yeah. Here's a quote. Why was she getting pissed off at him now? Part of the same pattern. Wow, Joanna thought. Female instincts? Glom onto the strongest guy around? That didn't make sense. It certainly wasn't part of her philosophy. She was Joanna, fully liberated, her own person, in control of her life. So we're all seeing the same thing. I love that. Which is why when we talk about feminism and everything on, quite frankly, it's you have to appreciate the system that has been created to allow girl power in the form that it has taken these days. If you do not have any humility in appreciating the system that was created to allow girl power to happen, and to allow girl power to be ensconced and protected by law and big burly men with the guns to enforce the law, then we're going to just fly way off the handle and nobody is humble anymore. And then you just get too big for your britches and you just don't understand what the nature of our species actually is when you take away this very fragile veneer that is our civilization, as we are seeing getting stripped away so quickly in this book. That's the whole thing. It's not that, especially people, just speaking for myself, I have no interest in seeing, women subjugated and, living like pilgrims. And I have no interest in it. I don't care. All right. I just want everybody to be decent with each other and to understand the reality of things. And if you understand the reality of things, and that keeps us in humble orbit. I believe it keeps us in a very humbling orbit. And yeah. Anyway, there's more. Death being inevitable and plenty else. Now there's about 10 other people that have put into this this thread. Let's see, going to the bottom real quick. Jelky. Let's see. This was such a sad scene. Hold on. Open the bundle. Oh, yeah. Hold on. Let's see. That's right. They're just thrusting the baby out the window. Sad scene. I audibly gasped when Tim threw the baby out the window. I know it was dead, but it wasn't John Doe, a nameless baby. It was John Mason. The mother had told him to remember his name. When Tim had second thoughts about tossing him out the window, Eileen said that they weren't going to eat him. They wouldn't be that hungry. I think this scared Tim. Both the coldness coming from the woman he loved and reality smacking him in the face. If he wanted to survive this, he was going to have to do a lot worse than throwing a baby out the window. I think that's why he said he felt like he was letting some of his life drop onto that pavement. Yes. Absolutely. And you know what? Eileen is... The one thing that bothered me about Tim and Eileen is the fact that she's always driving. That just bothered me. What the fuck is wrong with you, Tim? What the hell's his problem? Can't... Get behind the damn wheel, man. I don't get that. Anyway, there's so much more. There's so much more here. But if I read everything, then we're going to be here for another 45 minutes, and I want to keep these to tight hours if I can. And we're already an hour and 10 in. So let me just make sure we have this. We're reading from the chapter starting called The Landlord, and you stop reading when you hit After Doomsday. It's a little under 100 pages. That's it. That's it. And we'll be here same time, same night next week. I can't wait. In fact, from now on, whenever my book club is scheduled, I'm going to make sure I do that 7 o'clock show from home, because I really like already being home for book club. There's nothing creepier than leaving that building at the studio at like 10 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night, being the only person in that building. Like that, there's nothing creepier sometimes. So I'll be doing this from home from now on book club nights. Anyway, thank you guys and gals so much. Been watching you all in the chat room. You've been wonderful. Man, these have been so well attended. And I appreciate you. So I'll talk to you guys tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Anything else, email me, quitefranklypodcast@gmail.com. Or if you are on Subscribestar or Patreon, there is the built-in messaging system. Also on Foxhole, message me. Hey, I really love this. I have a question about this. And of course, get into that thread on the forum. All right. Thank you guys and gals. All the best to you and happy reading. See you soon.